Good afternoon guys and welcome back to the channel, welcome back to Dave's, finally Dave's fitting. So last week we talked about bounce and grind. Dave was excited because we're still going to be testing these wedges and we've been inside, we've got some numbers, we're out here now testing a club around the edge of the greens. We've obviously looked at Dave had a 43-degree wedge, we've tried a 50 because Dave had a 50 in his set already, and we've also tried a 48. So numbers which I'll put on screen now, we saw with Dave's pitching wedge we was getting a good yardage of carrying about 110 and going to 120 yards. So we needed to find something within 10 to 15 yards of that, and you'll see we went to a 50 which Dave had in his bag, and we can clearly see that it was too much of a gap. So carrying 85, not going far enough. So carrying 85 yards, going 95. So there was a 25-yard gap in between, which Dave struggled with. It doesn't feel with his pitching wedge, with his apex, that he can control one in, because they're quite fiery, they're quite fast face, which is why Dave got those irons in the first place. So we've then looked at the 48, and the 48 in on TrackMan was giving us a perfect number really. It was carrying around about 95 on average and going out to about 105, 103. So that gave us a 15-yard gap. So a 15-yard gap for me, guys, is good. Everyone always says 10 yards, but a 15-yard, it gives you some more room with three-quarter shots. And Dave said obviously this is a club that he would use for not really hitting many full shots. No. And that's why we're out here now, because we want to test these two clubs around the green. We also found with a 50 it was a W ground, which as we know from last week we spoke about, that was the widest sole, so it was a wide sole. It was for people who had a steep angle of attack, and that's anything but what Dave is. He's nice and shallow like you can see there. So we're getting out here now and testing Dave with a bump and run. We've gone to two different flags there, and we can see that Dave has been able to play different shots with that 48. Does that feel comfortable off there?
Yeah, it feels easy to hit. I think with the wider sole, I'm getting too much ground with it. I just don't.
Dave feels like he's bottoming out a little bit, too much bounce, too much of a wide sole on the 50 is just making him feel like it's a bit of a drop kick when he hits it. Yeah. We're going to switch to that now, and Dave's going to hit a couple more shots, and we're going to see, we're going to go to the same two flags and see how he reacts. So we're going to change now. So I've got the W ground here, the 50 degrees, so we'll switch over, Dave, from that 48, and we're going to show you now. Dave didn't feel as comfortable with this one, especially inside on the fuller shots. Even on a mat he didn't feel great, so here he's more than likely or potentially could get a few drop kicks or thins again, and that's gone pretty good, but that's running past. That would have gone over the green. Again, didn't feel comfortable with that. Is that because you know it's got that little wider sole?
You know, it's just in your mind that it's not the right club for you, so somehow your brain says, well, you're not going to hit it then. That's me.
And that's the thing, guys, but you need to get out and test it on grass. Don't just test it on a range. Get down in different lies and see how it reacts. This is a club that Dave's going to use for a bump and run, potentially in and around the green. If it goes to the front one, again, you could hear straight away, probably on the camera, a little bit of a drop kick. Too far. And it's ran straight on. So straight away there, guys, that's a club that's not going to be great for Dave. He's not going to have confidence in it. No. And this is where, picking off the rack, you might be somebody who thinks, you're right, I'm a high handicapper golfer, I instantly need a wide sole, I need as much forgiveness, I need as much bounce as possible, and then you get over it and it's the total wrong club for you. Dave's a mid-handicap golfer, he's very shallow with his angle of attack, so everything will be pushing you towards wider sole and more forgiving, but the right club for Dave here is 10 degrees of bounce, a 48 degrees, it fits in a little bit better, and around the green, the S grind, which is again a little bit narrower, it's the standard sole, you can square that up, is better for him. He's going to give this W ground one last chance. Can he get one close to this front flag?
Front flag. Come
on. A little bit better strike, but still runs on.
Still runs on.
So guys, that's Dave's first wedge that he will be purchasing at some point when we can cut Dave a classic Yorkshire deal. But Dave's going to get a 48 degree, it fits perfect with his 43 degree pitching wedge, so it fits in nicely. Gapping wise, it gives us that 15 yards difference, which was what we saw inside on the TrackMan. That gives him some good options around the green as well. It's not just a club that he's going to hit full shots with, which everybody does instantly think with a 48. He can come round the green, he can play bump and runs with it. he can pick it off nicely on here, whereas with his pitching wedge we saw that he wasn't confident in doing a bump and run with that because of the strong loft. He wasn't able to control distance very well, was you?
And it means that Miss Harrison might have something to buy me for Christmas rather than just pants and socks.
Dave's getting more than pants and socks for Christmas. So next week, guys, what we're going to do is going to look what the next wedge for Dave is. Do we go obviously from 48 straight to 52, or do we go a bigger gap and we go straight up to a 54? What's going to work inside on the TrackMan with the numbers? What's going to work around the green? And which bounce and grind is going to suit Dave better around the green? We're going to get into the rough. We're going to hit some shots out of the rough, see how it gets through that, especially in winter conditions when it's a little bit wet. Again, if you're playing the summer and you're in the morning, we need to see how the wedge gets through that, what we can do. Do we want to open it up? If you're somebody who plays with a square face, you might stick with an S grind. If you're somebody who likes to open it up and do different shots, get the club higher, get the handle lower, then we need to look at what kind of bounce and grind.
With there being so much bounce on them, that mean that any one of them would be fine for in the sand, for instance?
Yeah, so there's enough bounce on those. Again, in the sand, you're going to be able to think about, well, you've got to think about, do you open the club face up? They've got plenty of bounce, but for example, the wide sole W grind, you might be playing with a squarer face, so it's got a wider sole, you might be much squarer than that, as opposed to open it up too much. So we've got to take into account there, but all of these, even with 8 degrees bounce, depending on your angle of attack, that's going to be enough bounce to get out. Even if you went down to 6, it all depends what sand's in your bunkers. If there is any sand, that's always a controversial topic. But if you've got compact bunkers, you might want less bounce because you're going to be a little bit squarer. If you've got a lot of sand, you might need a lot of bounce in a special wedge such as your 60. You might have a 60 just because you've got a lot of sand in your bunkers. You need to have a lot of bounce there, and that might be an option that Dave goes for. So guys, next week, like we said, we're going to be looking, is it going to be a 52? Is it going to be a 54? We know it's definitely not a 50 because that's something we've just got rid of out of Dave's bag by replacing that. So guys, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, and we will see you again next week.
See you soon.